Welcome back to the CTO Playbook, the podcast dedicated to helping CTOs excel. Is going faster as a CTO really about engineers producing code more quickly? Or is it about how decisions are made, incentives are designed, and how deeply users are understood? In this episode of the CTO Playbook, I'm joined by Loïc Houssier, CTO at Superhuman, to unpack what engineering velocity really means in a modern product-led SaaS company. We explore how Superhuman sustains speed without sacrificing quality, why career ladders quietly shape behavior, and how empathy for users, right down to the last pixel, becomes a strategic advantage. If you still think speed is about pressure or headcount, this conversation may change the way you see it. I'm your host, Adam Horner, coach to CTOs from startups to enterprises, helping you lead with clarity, confidence, and strategic impact. If you feel like you're figuring this role out the hard way, you're not alone. That's why I created the CTO Playbook, a podcast and platform built for tech leaders just like you. Explore coaching, cohorts, and get the newsletter at thectoplaybook.com and start building your own playbook on your path at your pace. Now let's meet Loïc and walk through his playbook. Loïc, welcome to the CTO Playbook. I'm really pleased we're doing this. We've both been mentioned in the CTO Craft 100 in 2025, which was an unexpected grace to have. Really good to have you.
Well, thanks for having me. I think me, Adam, are really nice. I love the show and I watched a couple of them, and it's always really good to get those feedback from real people. Yeah, so happy and humbled to be there.
Excellent. And it's going to be great to have a little bit of a masterclass from you, because I think your background speaks for itself, but perhaps it would be really good for you to just take us through the short version of your journey so far, the roles, the companies, and what led you to Superhuman at that particular point in time.
Yeah, I mean, I have gray hair, so I can take hours, talk about everything that happened to me, but I try to make it short. In a nutshell, I started in Europe, in France. I was a security researcher in a big corporation, Orange telco company. So started then and moved to the defense industry, still on the security side, big corp player as well. I had the opportunity to spend 2 years outside of the tech industry, which is really interesting for driving influence, influencing people without technical legitimacy. Then I decided to switch to startups. That startup being acquired by an American company called DocuSign. And I switched to San Francisco within DocuSign for a good portion of my career, something like 7 years within DocuSign, from scale up to IPO to maybe too big for me. So I decided to come back to startups again. And a couple of startups before joining Superhuman, basically last year. It's my anniversary.
Oh, wow. So 1 year spent at Superhuman. And for those people who don't know what Superhuman is, I mean, I don't understand which rock they've been hiding underneath, but perhaps for those people who've not heard about it before, you can give us a quick rundown of what it is and how it's different from the competitors.
I mean, it's so different that people are willing to pay for an email client. Everyone is using Gmail, Outlook. It's great until it's not. And when it's not anymore, people are looking for other options. And Superhuman is the de facto standard for the people that are looking for a better experience. It's focused on speed. It's focused on productivity gains. So basically, our main users historically were CEOs, CTOs, CXOs, founders, VCs, because they don't have time. They live in emails. I always speak with a lot of people. They don't have time to have a huge backlog of emails, mark and do, and all of that. And Superhuman Mail now, because we've got acquired by Grammarly, now named Superhuman, but Superhuman Mail is the best email app ever built.
And it's been quite fun to see all the people at the end of 2025 boasting about the numbers of tens of thousands of emails that they've dealt with over the course of the year.
Yeah, and interestingly, what we hear from our users is that now they enjoy email. And usually they switch to us because they hate it. They waste so much time there. And now they start seeing the progress and how much faster they are and how much hours they save every week. And now they enjoy managing emails, which is a pretty cool feat.
Yeah. And the thing I've always know when you've made it as a startup is when you see other startups describing them as X for Y. So Superhuman for LinkedIn, or Superhuman when you get to that stage that you've firmly established in the minds of many users.
Yeah, this is very interesting how Rahul basically created a brand out of the tool. It was a tool, now it's a brand, and people associate that with sleek interface, I would say speed, interaction, and overall productivity things that feels good when you use it. And it's really cool to see those startups basically calling them Superhuman for X. It's really cool.
Excellent. And now, talking of which, you've worked across startups, scale-ups, and as you mentioned, some very large enterprise companies in the past, including the defense industry. So when you look back now, what do you think those sort of very different environments have taught you that you still rely on today as a CTO?
Oh, that's interesting. So for a starter, I studied I'm a math graduate. So I learned math. And the key in math is to detect patterns, abstract from them, and try to understand how you can formalize a concept out of some anecdotal different things that you're facing. And I feel as a leader, as a CTO, this is what we do every day. Every time you come up with a new problem, it's like, oh, I've seen something similar, like in the past, maybe in a different context, maybe in a different country, maybe in a different industry, but roughly said, it's the same abstraction level. Like if you abstract from it, same thing. So I think that from every single experience in my past, I got something out of it. And that's usually something that I say to people, like first 10 years in your career, just say yes to any opportunity, because even if you don't like it, you will learn a ton. And if you're able to abstract from what you've learned, you can readapt that to any new context.
This is it. Yeah, powerful experiences give you even more powerful pattern matching abilities later on.
No, exactly. And just to give you like more meat, one example that was like a really key for me and express how diversity in your background can be like extremely impactful. I spent 2 years outside of the software industry. So I spent some time doing maintenance of submarines, carrier aircraft, like those like French Navy, I would say big boats and all of that. Nothing related to tech. So I was not a CTO anymore. Like I was doing like cost reduction, like process improvement and all of that.
Classic engineering.
No, I mean, yes, exactly. Classic engineering. And it was like, fascinating for me, but like I didn't have any clue about like torpedo systems, radar systems and all of that. And I was coming from a world where I was leading through my technical legitimacy. I was a security expert. I was a security researcher in my background. So when I was coming into like a room or something, I was kind of like relying on my knowledge to drive and influence people. And all of that is moot when you come to a world where you don't know shit. Pardon my French, but you have to find different ways. So interestingly, I had to put my ego in my pocket. I had to put like everything and start from scratch. And like, okay, let's start to abstract. Let's learn from people, how they work, be very humble. And it works like a charm. It works really well. And now when you have this new tool and you're like, wow, I can apply that into like every single environment. And you're very comfortable with people knowing way more than you. And I think this is like a very specific experience that you can basically take over like any places. So that's usually why I say like your first 10 years, do as much as you can. And then you will see that it will be like highly valuable in your next endeavors.
And I think that's a really key point, though, because if you're trying to lead from a point of technical expertise and technical superiority, you can always be the smartest person in the room. Whereas if you're leading without that, as you said, put it in your pocket and put it away, it means you lead from a very different perspective. And therefore, you don't necessarily have this technical authority, but instead you have a very human connection, a very procedural approach to leadership. And I think that comes across generally as more human, greater connection between people, and generally more credible.
Yeah, and it's also like something that all salespeople know. Like when you're trying to get your point and you try to sell an idea, the things to do is like to start 90% of the time, like the first 90% of the meeting, understand you are basically the person that is in front of you. So don't try to explain why you're better. Try to understand their problem. Try to understand their world so that you would be way more relevant for the 10% of time you would spend talking about your thing. And I think it's something that we maybe don't do enough as like a technical leader. We believe we know, we have some experience, so we tend to go straight to the solution. But sometimes it's way faster spending the time understanding better the problem, understanding how people think about it, so that even if you decide to come with your initial idea, you can frame it in a way that is much more relevant for the people that you're trying to influence.
Absolutely. And talking about that being a faster approach, I think is a wonderful moment to segue onto this idea of velocity and speed, something which obviously Superhuman is known for. But what I wanted to sort of unpack with you today is, what is it that you understand by engineering velocity? Because I think it's one of those terms that is massively overloaded. Many people use it and many different ways. So when you say engineering velocity, what is it that you mean, Look?
That's an interesting and loaded question. If you ask my chief business officer, the real velocity is like the rate of innovation to the market. If you ask me as kind of like the factory manager, like the person in charge of like things going in and out, it's kind of like the throughput, like how much are we basically doing generally, because not everything is innovation to the market. Some stuff are like preparing for scale. Some stuff are like tweaking the system, maybe like getting rid of the tech debt and stuff that you will need eventually to prepare the further like a velocity. So I think it highly depends. But like generally, I love to see velocity as a way when something is coming in and something is coming out, reducing that cycle, whatever that cycle is made of. Like, is it an idea in the hands of the, like coming out of a founder, and this idea being in the hands of our end user? That's probably one, I would say, cycle that I will look at definitely. And if it's like an idea from an engineer, how much time for this idea to come to life, even if it's not in the end of the user? So that's what I think when I think about like velocity, that's what I think about. And there's so many contributing factors, I would say, that are like underneath. And we can talk in depth about like those factors, but definitely it's not the time to code. Like time to code is a tiny portion of like this cycle. So when you're trying to get more velocity because the market, because you're bored, because all the people that are trying to get you to do more with less, like focusing on the time to dev is probably not the right approach. Like take a step back and try to understand where the people are spending time, and usually not in GitHub.
And one of the things that I find about that is that there is a very marked difference between those teams that genuinely actually move fast versus those that look like they're moving fast. And I mean, you've probably seen both of these in your time. You've probably seen all variants of sort of, speed theater. But are there a couple of key markers you would look for where you'd be able to say, okay, that's genuine speed versus performance of speed?
So that's an interesting one. I think that, and trying to take a step back, my way to look at an organization or like a company and how fast they are is usually like the decision process. So try to make like a meaty decision. Come back to my initial word of like the defense industry. You need $6K dollars or euros, okay? I had to spend 6 months building a business case to explain why I needed this $6K extra budget because it was not planned for like the yearly budget we had. 6 months, a business case, and a ton of hours on my side to craft like the content that was reviewed by my manager because it was coming to like some committee to make sure that it was approved and everything. 6 months. One of the last startup, I needed 1 million. Took me 1 week to convince the CEO. So when you're able to make those decisions quickly, and of course you have to be articulate, you have to prepare the reasoning why you need that money and everything. But when you're able to make those decisions fast, like overall, the overall organization will be fast, including EPD. And one thing that I tend to say to my managers when I hire them or like when I coach them, it's always better to make 10 decisions and 2 wrongs rather than to make 1 decision that is right. Because at the same time, you will have 8 decisions made right. And you don't want the wrong ones, that's fine. Because like the balance is like hugely positive. So like move fast, make decisions, and you know what, don't think twice. It's all right to some extent.
So optimize for throughput, including decisions, rather than for correctness.
Interestingly, yes. There's always this concept of like a 2-way doors versus 1-way door, like for the decisions, of course. But generally speaking, yes, I'd rather take risk and make fast decisions rather than make too many safe bets. We don't have everyone is moving fast. So like if you're moving slower than anyone else, you're basically dying.
Yeah, and that's going to show up very quickly in pretty much all the numbers and results that you can look at.
Yeah. 100%.
Are there any signals that you pay attention to that you feel as though other organizations tend to gloss over or to skip?
One metric or one thing that I tend to look at to understand how fast is an organization is a decision log. There's always a place where decision logs, whether it is like a technical decision, call it like an ADR, call it like a tech review plan, whatever that is. Usually you have those documents that will document how a decision is made in the company. The size of the document is probably the best metric I've ever had about like the velocity and the health of an organization. I would say one in my past experience, like a startup, relatively small company, 120 people. So we're talking about like small companies, not tiny startup, but like post Series B, market fit is already there and everything, but technically still a startup. You're not there. You're not successful yet. And I come in and during my onboarding, the first week, I come across one of those technical decisions. And it was like the decision to technically like a product, like decision to sunset a feature on the product. I think, cool, this is typically the type of decision that I want to understand and how they're made. The document was like 20 pages long. I mean, it was a Notion document, so like not technically pages, but like 20 equivalent, I would say, pages long document. A lot of data, a lot of like things in it. Like the work was like stellar in terms of like backing with data why it should be canceled. The document was started like 3 months earlier.
Right,
the reason was so obvious. Like that should have been like a 1-pager. And that decision should have been made by the peer, not by a committee of people all around it. So this is typically the type of someone like, okay, easy wins, very easy wins. Like I can engage and I know what I can do to help this organization move faster.
So keep those decisions efficient and keep the process moving quickly.
Yeah. For all the CTOs that are onboarding in a new company, like as part of your first 90 days, try to check like one of the latest key decision made and how it was documented. Trove of findings on how to, I would say, help the organization.
And as you say, just the date lag between when the document was started and when the decision was made probably tells you quite a lot there already.
It tells you if the company is consensus-driven versus consent-driven, if you have like a clear DRI, is the PM really the owner of the surface area or not? Like it tells you like so much about the organization and the problem, the lack of trust, the role of the founder maybe, and like the fear of people maybe, like to, I would say, make those decisions. So many inputs you get from that one document. And of course, you discuss with people and you will see that document was so right that everything that you will go after will be just more data showing that there's some easy fixes for the organization. Well, I say easy fixes, at least easy problems to spot.
Yeah,
then you need
easy
to
ones
fix.
to spot. Yeah, the solution's not always easy. Good disclaimer there. Now, I think one of the key things there is that kind of knowledge is built on years and years of experience. And what I'd love to do is just sort of wind back the clock a little bit and go back earlier in your career and just have a look to those points where you sort of came across those early challenges and misconceptions that have sort of really built your MO, your way of working, your modus operandi to these days. So was there a time at which you got very much a wrong idea about going faster, and what happened?
Yeah, that's a really interesting. There's a couple of examples. So I was acquired by DocuSign. I was a startup in France. And it was, I don't know, 15 years ago, 14 years ago, something like this. So like the startup scene has already changed and all of that. But at the time, being a tiny company and a startup was something that was different. Anyway, during the acquisition, we were showing our numbers to the folks at DocuSign that were interested in basically our company, our tech and everything.
So was this during the due diligence phase then?
During the due diligence phase, yes.
Right.
So I won't share like any secrets or like all of that, but it was really interesting to see the reaction of DocuSign, like people looking at our numbers. We were showing that we were cash flow positive. We were showing that, we had good results, a lot of monitoring, a lot of data and all of that. And they came back looking at that and we were quite proud of it. And they look at it like, you guys are wasting your time. I'm like, what do you mean? It's pretty good, it's steady. Like for one, what do you not reinvest that money like in the future of the product? Like being cash flow positive right now, it's stupid. You have a good product, you have a market fit, like reinvest right now. You shouldn't be cash flow positive right now. I'm like, holy cow. Like we were waiting for like the cash flow, basically like the extra money to fund like innovation. They were basically saying like, don't even like, I would say, spend that into like your innovation because you're losing time for the next 3 years. So even that concept was like totally game changer for us. And the other aspect and place where I learned a lot post-acquisition. So I was trying to move fast because I'm like a very productivity nerd. I wanted to get shit done fast and everything. But sometimes you need to understand the environment you live in. And DocuSign was moving fast in their own way. And we were moving fast in a different way. And I had to learn their ways because I was trying to break all walls. I was like going there with the feeling that speed for speed was good. So I was kind of like trying to optimize locally versus optimizing globally in the company.
Right.
So, and I think I was wrong. I made a mistake there. I tried to force the system to comply with what we were. And in retrospect, post, I would say this acquisition, I could have done probably way better. I don't complain, but like I could have done way better if I spent the time really understanding where DocuSign was coming from. What was their ways of thinking, like what is speed and how to rely on the speed compared to the place where I was coming from, where to me speed, it was all autonomy. Let me do whatever I want because I know I was doing that with my small company. Just let me do it. And of course, you come into like a company that is much more compliant and they have some processes, but they go fast, but like in a very tiny way. So you have to fit in this tiny tunnel. But when you're on the rails, it moves fast. The problem was that I was trying to build my own rails inside this very compliant, I would say, ecosystem. And I think that was one mistake for me, is not trying to understand their ways of moving fast.
Right. So it comes back to this idea of listen first and then speak afterwards then almost. Yeah.
I made so many mistakes in my career on that area, but that was another good learning for me.
Because one of the other ones that typically is made is people think, we need to go fast. Let's add more people, right? So this is the mythical man month idea. But in retrospect, that often doesn't work. It often is one of those ones where you add more people and it slows things down. But also at the same time, there are those people who say, well, the only way to go faster at a certain point is just to add more people. It might not be efficient at all, but show me a quicker way.
I think it worked at some point where money was like just flowing. So before the period, like this zero interest rate period where money was flowing and everything, you don't care to waste money. So like as an organization, spin up a team and move fast and build something. That's a way to do it. You spend a lot of money doing it, but like it can work. And there's a lot of like managers that were like really wired to do it. Give me a problem problem. I spin up a team. I would say create this small BU inside this huge, being Google, being Amazon and whatever. And I will solve your problem. Not the most efficient way to use your money, but like probably a good way to get to the market. And then after the zip period, all of a sudden, wait. We might want to be like a bit more thoughtful about the money and the way we spend it. And all of a sudden, the mantra and those managers in those big companies that were used to move fast by adding and throwing people, they were not like the one that the VCs in the Bay Area especially were looking for, because they had one way to move fast and that way was not working anymore in the new world. And now they were looking for people that were, I would say, doing things like do more with less, like move faster with less money, with less people. And how do you do it? And this is kind of like it was something like niche market of CTOs that were like doing that for a living. And that's kind of like, I would say, what I've done in the last 10 years, something like this.
Yeah. And because one of the things I've always tried to work with is clearly teams have to scale at some point, adding people in. And there's often this sort of also a challenge, not only just adding more people in, but as you add more people in, you need to add more process as you add more people, but within reason, right? You don't sort of suddenly tip from chaotic startup land straight into sort of Google level of processes. There's this kind of growth phase of growing process along with headcount. And that's one of those things I teach my coaching and also my coaching courses. But in terms of going through that phase, did you go through that phase of sort of managing this sort of, process, people, headcount, levers in a sort of a subtle way?
And probably one thing that I would say I have now in my mind, which is very important, is if you're a founder or like if you're a CTO, you need to understand that there's like some very specific stage of the company that you are really a good fit for. Huge company and being like a VP Edge or a CTO for a huge company, it's one kind of a job. Being a CTO for a Series A or a pre-seed company, different job. And it's very uncommon that the same CTO would be the right fit at every stage of the company. So I took over some CTOs that were CTO founders that at some point were like, holy shit, that's not my job anymore. Like, I don't know, I cannot scale that. I'm still interested in the platform. And they have this weird moment where they're like, what, should I focus on the tech? Should I focus on the org? Because I need to scale this org. But at the same time, I want to scale this platform. And usually they don't have like multiple experience of being like IC CTO to like first manager to like organization builder. And this is where like the bright people understand that they should not cling and I would say to the role, and they understand like not for me anymore. And as a co-founder of the company, like, okay, we need someone there. And even for me, like if I caricature a bit what I think I'm pretty good at Series B to Series D. That's my sweet spot. Before that, too early, too crappy, product market fit is not there yet and everything. Different kind of CTO. You have the product market fit and now you want to scale and organize this thing to be like super efficient and move fast. That I'm good. Once it's becoming to be like way bigger, different size and everything, probably my strong suit either. So like that's why like after DocuSign, when I did this scale up IPO different, now I know, I would say, what is my sweet spot.
Your boundaries where you operate best.
My boundaries, yes, clearly.
Excellent. And so when you get to that point where you're getting to the stage where you're thinking, okay, this is outgrowing me, what are the signs you look for? What are the bits that break first as you're looking at your own performance and the organizational performance at that stage?
That's a good question. I focus on the joy. Like how much joy do you get from your day-to-day work? If you start losing the joy, like losing the kind of like this bright energy that you have at every problems and everything and feeling that you're tackling. If you start feeling that, damn, I cannot tackle those problems anymore, I feel a bit overwhelmed, that's the time to take a step back. And there's many, I would say, good reason for feeling overwhelmed. But like sometimes the reason is maybe it's just an adequation of like the situation and who you are, and the fit is not there anymore because the type of problems you're tackling are not the ones that you want to tackle. And it's not a matter of skills. Maybe you have the skills, like the joy is like getting down. So with the joy getting down, the energy will be down. And I mean, we need a lot of energy in this work. So it's important to really focus on this.
Absolutely. It begins to affect everything about you, doesn't it? Including the other people surrounding you as well, which is often sometimes, I think, one of those signals that if other people can sense that you're not enjoying yourself anymore, that's also another strong signal to have a look at that again.
Yeah, but like something that is coming to mind as well is like, I guess like the scale of like the impact that you have and like the time frame of your impact. When you're a CTO of a seed stage company, you have an impact every freaking day. So like the dopamine and the reward, every day you have it. When you start to be like on a Series B, your focus is like, oh no, I want the organization to be better. And your time frame is like quarter. When you're more like a pre-IPO company, like your impact is probably multi-quarter, which means that all the work that you're doing will bear their fruit 2, maybe 3 quarters away. More impactful, bigger organization. So overall, this is amazing. But like you have to have this patience to wait for those 3 quarters to basically like release and show that, yes, indeed you're impactful. And this is also something that helped me understand that I'm not a fit for those big companies anymore because I want to see the impact relatively fast enough. So I'm patient, but to a certain extent. So if you see that everything that you're working on will have an impact in 3 quarters because the size of the company, and you cannot wait to have those like reward and dopamine effect, that might be a signal that this type of role might not be for you. So it might be something to consider.
That's a really, really good way of framing it. I love that. And talking about patience and sustainability, I wanted to talk about the sustainability of speed actually as well, because I think, you talked about using engineering principles and also using career ladders to shape behavior. I mean, you're talking about that dopamine there, but using a career ladder, I think is quite an interesting way of looking at how you create speed. How do those two things translate into actual quicker execution day to day?
I think this is like, take Google, for example. Google is very famous for like starting, or was famous. So I would take I don't talk about the current Google and current people at Google, but they have this tendency to build many products, many V1s. They come in, they launch, they die. Like a lot of small projects like this, and sometimes competitive against themselves and all of that. And it was kind of surprising. And then you understand that their career later, to be promoted to the next role, you need to prove that you're able to do a 0 to 1 project. So the strong incentive for the engineers is to build a 0 to 1 project, even if it doesn't make sense for the big pound, like the global, I would say the global company. So understanding that, you understand that your career ladder and the way you promote people is probably one of the best tools you have to influence their behavior. And I think that sometimes it's seen as corporate to build a career ladder, to really think about it, or I need levels. I will go to levels.fyi. I will bring whatever levels there are, maybe some competency stuff and everything, and you overlook it. The reality is people, they want to be promoted. The people want to see progress in their career. So they will look at the career ladder. They will try to understand what's required to get to the next level. And if you don't pay attention at the career ladder and the domain area you focus on to assess a promotion, people will always try to reinforce those concepts that are here. So if you want speed needs to be front and center. And if speed is not in your career ladder, in your engineering principles, why people should care about it? It's not something that will get me promoted. So it's words. It's basically values that you've put on the wall, but the reality is it's not implemented in a thing that I really do care about. Of course, people care about their promotion and they care about their paycheck. So that's kind of something that usually people overlook. And to be very precise, when I was at Product Board, this is the one thing that I changed when I came in. I changed both the engineering principle and I call them speed. And thanks to ChatGPT now, when you have the different categories of stuff you want to influence, you get some fancy acronyms that you can use that can get catchy. So people can speed. Yes, speed. And everyone is talking about speed. Everyone is talking about the different categories. Everyone D in speed was about decision making. Just one paragraph to explain, hey, you know what? Better be making decisions 8 out of 10, thing that I was mentioning. Put it in writing. Show that it's part of the principle and show that in your career later that for each level you expect much more in terms of speed increment. There's a dedicated area called speed, and then there you can say for a level 1 engineer, maybe it's about the throughput, number of PR per engineer, whatever, something. I would not suggest to do it, and we can talk about the drawback of putting some KPIs like this, but this is where you can drastically influence behaviors.
So making an incentive for each level of career progression such that people are striving for it all the time, because it's going to be measured at every stage, at every level, for every quarter, and influence reward.
And you want people to talk about it. And very interestingly, one thing that I've seen, so you're from Europe as well. And when I talk with startups in Europe, the sense of urgency is not the same as the sense of urgency that we have in the Bay Area. So when we talk about speed, that counts. If you feel that your startup that is barely a Series B making maybe 2-digit millions of dollars and you feel you arrived and you're successful, you're fooling yourself. You might die tomorrow because Google is making a move, because a new startup is starting tomorrow and will basically eat your lunch. So how do you recreate that sense of urgency so that people feel no, the company might die in a week or in a month if I don't work hard to get there? And I feel this is something that I'm trying to, as a coach, trying to tell people that are building a company in Europe, don't feel arrived if you have 1 million of ARR or 10 million of ARR. That's not arrived. Arrived is go public. You can say that you arrived. That's cool. Until then, it's fun. It's a fun ride and everything, but your company might die. And again, that might not be your main motivation at work and everything, but if you're deeply invested as a CTO of on the result of the company, you need to bring that sense of urgency to everyone working in the organization.
And when you go for speed, because one of the things I have seen therefore is organizations that optimize on speed, and they optimize on what I call raw speed rather than than thorough velocity, in that there are certain things that become compromised. Quality and thoroughness, a couple of things that can sometimes get compromised to the point where you're thinking, well, it's speed, but it's not actually sustainable. It's not maintainable. How do you balance those two things, the sort of the craft level with that raw velocity?
That's a really interesting one. And Superhuman is pretty well known for its perceived quality as a product. I mean, people are, yeah, exactly. And people are paying a bunch for like a product that is otherwise free. So like when you ship something new, people expect this to work. Like kind of like you have a fancy car and you pay like a bunch of money to get that fancy car. You expect everything to be close to perfect. So we're in the same situation. But at the same time, we're a startup and we need to move fast because competition, they're not waiting. So like I can tell you that my CEO wouldn't be okay with me increasing velocity, but taking a hit on quality. So I have to manage both. The good thing is, and that's why I was insisting on the fact that velocity is not on the code part. Like our engineers working on the vast majority of the case, I mean, they work well. They do their best. Like you cannot squeeze them and you shouldn't squeeze them. If you start squeezing them, then the quality will degrade. What you need to do as much as you can is like reduce the time to readiness for engineer to work. You have this idea, you want to do X, Y, and Z. Between this idea and I would say is just like mentioned, and your engineer really like being in the code and creating his PR, there's a lot of time. And usually we start the PR very soon, and then the idea is forming. There's a lot of questions. We have a lack of clarity about like the technical strategy. So I need to go to the architecture committee or whatever to understand if I do the right thing and everything. This is what takes a lot of time, not like the coding part. So when it comes to velocity, usually I don't look at like the number of PR, like the code part especially. I look at everything that is before. Like what is taking time? Is it maybe you don't have enough designers and they don't provide design fast enough, which means that every time you ship something, or the CEO is reviewing, I would say, the design, like, no, it's not, I would say, we should be doing, go back. And then you go back to the designer, you do another cycle, but like the designer is short-staffed, so it's like they go fast, so the experience is not great. So this is the type of stuff that I will usually try to, I would say, solve for, so that engineers can have this focus time and deliver the value.
And that's quite a lot of sequence of steps in there, because I sort of sense from what you're saying that there's an element of sort of autonomous decision making, but what you're actually doing is you're pre-making a lot of those decisions and then reducing the friction in the other areas such that somebody can go and collaborate quickly around an idea with some safe guardrails that they know that they're going to come out with an acceptable level of quality on that speed as a result. Is that a fair assessment of what you're saying?
It's fair and it's very well, I would say, framed. I kind of like relate that to, if you remember like the Agile manifesto, like everyone was talking about Agile and everything. And if you look back like to what they were writing, it was like
the original 4 points.
No, exactly. And there was something about doing architecture on the fly. Like you don't need a committee because one, people were senior, so they know what they're doing. So that was one of the key input about like being an agile team, like senior people. They know their stuff. I would say they went to they have scars, so they know what they're doing. But the key part is like they know what they're doing because in advance, they've discussed about like the key principles. So what I love to do and try to bring to an organization is this concept of aligned autonomy. This is the level of alignment. Alignment being, I don't know, maybe like, you know what, in terms of reporting, only once a week. The way you manage your project, is it in Linear, is it in Jira, is it in Notion, is it in Coda? I don't care. What I care about is like every Friday you come for 15 minutes and you tell me your progress. So that at least people know, okay, we know that the one piece that we all align on is this. The rest, I'm free. So trying to bring this level of visibility or like awareness of what are the key things people should align on. For example, architecture decisions. Everything that is not like the database, you don't need an architecture decision. If you're just modifying like a bit of the business logic, you're modifying a bit of the front end and everything, go with it. Like no architecture or technical plans or whatever. But if you touch PIIs up front, you know that you will get that review. So be prepared and discuss in advance. So that when you have something like this big feature, big project, PII being discussed, okay, we know that we'll be discussing with security or whatever in compliance. Let's do it up front so that they understand what we're doing. They basically tell us what can be or cannot be done. And one discussion, 30 minutes, done. And then you can just code it. So aligned autonomy, and it can be like a proteiform. Like you can have like many different ways to think about this aligned autonomy, but I think it's a good reminder that as long as the aligned piece is really clear and the things you really do care about, then people will be fast. Do you really care about linting? Maybe, maybe not. Do you really care about the way people are documenting their feature? Maybe, maybe not. So what are the key principles you want people to be really aligned on? And then the groups, I mean, you hire senior people in this team. So like they should be like the guardians of things. They understand the concept, they understand where we are, trust them. And yeah, that at least that's my way.
And it sounds as though it's very effective, given what we've seen so far. And talking about effectiveness, I think one of the things I wanted to just touch on as well is in terms of being effective, going fast is great. But if you're going fast in the wrong direction, that's not a great outcome, not a great result. But going fast, therefore, requires that you know where you're going to. And one of the key things there is understanding who you're building for, the users, and having that empathy. And I think one of those things that keeps coming back in the conversations that I have with great CTOs is this idea that we're building for our users. We're not building in a vacuum. We're not building theoretical or abstract thing. We're building with our actual users in mind. How do you approach that idea of understanding what it is that the user needs?
I would say it starts with who you hire. We don't hire software engineers. We hire product engineers.
Explain that difference to us for those people who are not familiar with it.
Software engineer, if you ask me, or you ask ChatGPT, or you ask, or you look at everything, build me a hiring process for a software engineer. Oh yeah, look at this, look at that, and whatever. I'm very technical, maybe in interpersonal relationships, whatever, the classics. If you hire a product engineer, you filter early on how the person is thinking. Do you want to solve for technical problems, or do you want to solve for user problems? Technicality is fine, but are you a craft person for the sake of the craft, or are you a craft person for the sake of the user? And so we tweak our interviews, and we always try to spot if people are asking about the user. So for example, you do a system design. Every company is doing system design interviews, but in your system design, if the person is not asking about the user, tell me more about the experience they face, in the UI and everything, so that I can understand what is, I would say, the impact of what you're asking me. If they just focus on the technicality, they just focus on, I would say, pub sub mechanism, the way to shard the database and all of that, they never ask about the user and what they're trying to achieve, not good. It's a software engineer. And sometimes some companies, they just need software engineers, especially when you're at the size of, I would say, a really big corporation. You're usually in charge of a slice, a very technical piece. That's probably okay. But if you're a tiny company, laser focused on user experience, you need even your backend engineers to understand that when they change an API or the latency, what's the impact on the user experience. So that's what I mean by a product engineer, is someone that thinks about the product more than the software itself. Well, of course, you need great software, I would say, skills to build great product, but it's just a mean to a goal. And we hire for the goal rather than the mean.
Yeah, that reminds me of a couple of situations I've had, but one that stands out in my mind was where I was sitting in a room of engineers who were discussing about this technical implementation. And one in particular, quite senior, quite experienced engineer, was quite adamant on a particular software engineering approach to it. And the other engineer wasn't really sure about it at all. And I sat and listened to this for maybe 15 minutes before I just asked, what if we remove the feature altogether? Silence for about 10 seconds. And then suddenly they both pivoted to, okay, right, well, if we remove that, then it means this, then it means this. And there's suddenly this, the whole direction they were going in suddenly changed. And I think that's kind of indicative of those users, those people who are thinking about the users first, rather than those that are thinking about, okay, how does my solution look?
No, exactly. And I think now we're living in a world where, I was discussing that with some friends, but with AI coming, AI has come already. It's there.
It's definitely arrived by now, yes.
it's already there. But my point being is the progress that we see, building an average product is easy. Building an average product is freaking easy. Someone by themselves, they can build something now very fast. That is okay. Which means that what makes the difference between the different products is not the feature set anymore. It's not the technical space. It's the way you serve those features to the end user. And the experience matter way more than what you're doing with it. Good example being, you see, all those model frontier players like Google, Anthropic, and whatever, they were fighting on the models. And every time we had next week, this new model doing X, Y, and Z, and this new model, now the way they talk about it is totally different. We don't talk about the models that much. No. We're talking about the experience. What is the experience we're using those AI capabilities? And I think this is where working at Superhuman is very interesting and kind of a trajectory for me, because before Superhuman, I was at product board, which was very product-centric and very user-centric, and trying to understand how people building product think about building product. So getting closer to the product things part of my job, and now getting to the design part of my job is kind of mind-blowing. Understanding how different you should behave as a CTO to provide those experience. In this world of AI, if you don't have this appetite for the user experience and how your things, your features are rolled out, you will die. I'm pretty sure you will die. So in this world, world, I'm super happy to work with Rahul as a founder to basically learn those skills.
Because he has that meticulousness, that approach to the user experience being the number one metric pretty much above all else. Is that right?
Yeah, and it's very interesting. He has many things, but like two things that really struck me and that were like really different from other like founders I worked with. One is coming from game design. Like he was in the game design industry, like in the game industry, and he was a level designer. And he basically always think about the product he built as a level in a game. Like video game, there's a level, there's a beginning and end. There's some level of things that are happening through the levels to keep you happy during sort of small moment of delight. And at the end of this game, this level, you want to feel a reward. You want to feel finished, like, damn, I've done this level. That's why Superhuman, everything has been built with this concept in mind. What is the user journey within the product? What is the end goal? Well, the end goal for a mail client is to have 0 email in your inbox. How can we build this experience so that along the way it feels fun? So there's a lot of little toys like in the product that feels fun. And then at the end of the day, you have what we call this inbox 0 experience, which is silly when you think about it. It's just like you have 0 email, boom, you have this very nice, soothing like image and you feel done. And everyone has this like dopamine effect coming and people are basically like tweeting it. People are sharing on LinkedIn like, oh, damn, I feel so good today. Like this is my inbox 0 image of the day. So good. So that's the first piece, like thinking about the experience as a level in video game makes a huge difference. And every time we think about it, we build a product along those lines. When you're working on, for example, like you're on a game, I don't know if you're a gamer, Adam, but like I'm a gamer. So I'm playing with Ghost of Yotei right now as we speak on my PS5. And so for example, it's very important that when you hit a button, you have the reaction that is very fast. If it's lagging a bit, you don't have a good experience. And the nerds like will have like specific keyboards, specific like joysticks and everything to play to ensure that the rate of response of the video game is there. We build a product with the same approach. Everything that you do should be fast. We have this 100 milliseconds rule for that every interaction in the product should be 100 milliseconds so that it feels instant. It's silly and it's super complex. Like we can talk about the technicality behind it, but it means that everything is basically on device and we really I would say we cannot rely on network basically.
Yeah, I was going to say doing 100 sub 100 milliseconds over network connections is pretty much impossible. So there must be hundreds of tricks under the hood to make that happen.
So now you can imagine like the impact on building the product on multiple, I would say, surfaces like on iOS, on Android, on Mac, like it's crazy. So, but this is everything that is like related to this game design because it feels fast, it feels good. The other piece is like you don't want to be in the way. When you're working in your game, you go to the end of, I would say, your end goal. You want to move fast through it. You don't want like things to annoy you along the way. You want to feel that the story is going right. What does that mean for like a product like us? I was like, don't put some call to actions. Don't put some like pop-ups along the way that will break the flow of the user because it will feel bad. It will feel as like slowing down what the person is doing. So that's one piece. The other piece, and I will be like really fast, he basically taught me to stop looking and start observing. When I look at the design, I was like looking at things. I was like, yeah, sure, looks great. And he was coming back like, Loïc, this is shit. How did you miss it? I was like, what do you mean? Like 1 pixel down. I was like, holy cow. Yeah, that was not obvious. And I have a big screen and everything. And the level of precision of everything that he's looking at is through the roof. And not only on the product. And that's what is interesting. And this is how you bring to a company. Every external communication, even like a bill that we send to our customers are designed. And he will review the design. And that's something that is really interesting. When you see the level of care, you cannot behave like as a normal CTO. You have to change your ways.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones actually, is to look at organizations and see how well they've considered the billing and payment end of the experience as part of the user experience. Because I've seen so many experiences of platforms where people have a great sort of front end of the house experience, and then it gets the billing end of it, and they get a really sour experience with subpar payment options or really slow responses. And it's amazing what a difference it makes when it all lines up and you feel like, oh, I got a good experience in the product and the payment was a joy to use. Exactly. And it really does impact on the way that people think about the entirety of the experience. And yet so many founders and CTOs kind of ignore it somehow.
And I don't say we're perfect at all. So like, of course, we have our problems. Of course, I would say we mess up some stuff and everything. But this is like a constant battle to always like trying to think about those tiny details. Because because this is what will make the difference. That will, at the end, like this experience, this is what makes the difference between a 5 stars and like a 11 stars approach. If you like listen to Brian Chesky and how he's like driving Airbnb, like I love this analogy of, so he's always talking about these 5 stars. Like if you give 5 stars to like an Airbnb you've been in, it basically means you didn't have a problem. Doesn't mean it was great. It means it was like no problem. And it's a very American way to grade stuff. 5 stars, everything okay. But what is a 6 stars? What is 7 stars? And he's always asking their PM, like at Airbnb, like what is the 6 stars version of that feature? What is the 7 stars of that feature? Up to 11, so that you force yourself thinking about like how delightful it can be. And it makes a difference. And I won't name like products, but we are all using B2B SaaS product on the corporate side, whether it is HR system or like IT management systems and everything. And it works, but like working is only 5 stars. Like if you build an experience that is 6, 7 or 11 stars, like people will enjoy going to your product. And that makes a huge difference.
And I think back to your earlier point, it's in a world where AI makes it very feasible to build a 5-star product pretty rapidly. Differentiation comes from those extra moments of luxury, of integration, of unity, of the way that things look and feel.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the same in retail. Like you want to get a coffee, like everyone's doing coffee. Why do you get to that specific coffee? Is it really the brew? Is it really the grain? Maybe for the one that like the 10% of people that have the palate, like to make the difference. Like for 90% of the people, it's because the owner is nice. The atmosphere is good. It's not a coffee anymore. And I think that this is, I would say, where it's great to work for a company like this. I learned so many stuff here that I think that everyone should learn in this new world.
Yeah, and indeed. And I think there's a few anecdotes to sort of bring that kind of thing to light. But I think when it comes to coffee, I always love one of Simon Sinek's when he's talking about a particular barista in one of the hotels in Las Vegas. It turns out this barista worked in 2 different hotels in Las Vegas. And he said, he was a much different person working in one culture than he was in the other, just because the fact that all the other managers smiled, people turned up. And I just thought it was a really good example of having quality as something that runs from the top of the business all the way down through to the bottom. And I think it sort of lines up with your sort of visual line of it as well.
100%. 100%.
Look, it's been amazing talking to you. What I'd love to do is try and distill all this amazing set of knowledge down into something of a playbook. And it's probably not going to match brilliantly with the conversation we've had, but I've just written down a few notes as we've gone along. And correct me if I get anything wrong or clarify anything if I sort of make mistakes on it. But number 1 I had on your list here was that velocity is essential. And essentially that is the cycle time. How quickly can you go from idea to result? Number 2 on your list I had was decisions. Make them fast, even if they're sometimes wrong. A quick decision has more value than an unmade decision. Number 3, share behaviors through career progression incentives, which I thought was really subtle, really smart, and probably something that a lot of organizations don't do as well as they probably could. And I think your approach there was something that I think others could emulate quite clearly. Number 4, maintaining quality by reducing the time from idea to code, but also through aligned autonomy, which I thought was a phrase which I really loved you dropped in there. And then we're going on to product engineering. So recruiting engineers that care about the user first, in that they consider that for every design decision other than those that need to go through some sort of approval or regulatory process. And then finally, standing apart from your competitors through a great UX and a fast response. I thought that was something that stood out quite clearly in your approach. And I also loved, your CEO's approach there. Stop looking and start observing. I think that's something that probably applies to a lot of the things that we do.
Yeah, I mean, you summarized it like better than I would, but yeah, I can stand behind those principles 100%.
Thank you. And it's been fantastic to have a conversation. Look, if people want to continue the conversation with you, what's the best way for them to get hold of you?
LinkedIn is probably like the place to go. Shoot a note. Don't do like those like random no notes. Try to connect. My backlog is like, I don't have inbox 0 in LinkedIn. So I care about the people that make the effort to make like a real introduction and everything, but I'm always happy to discuss with people with these different experiences.
Thank you. And look, I always ask this question of experienced CTOs, and that is, if you are talking to a CTO who's just coming in to the role as a first time, perhaps they've just started their own company, what would be the one piece of advice you would leave them with?
Well, it's something that applies to pretty much any role, but I think that is very important. It's like spend the first 10 years to as much diverse experience as you can. And basically, you will see that this experience compound eventually. One guy, I think it was like, I don't remember the guy, but like he said something like, first 10 years, I do a lot of different things. After those 10 years, you start to understand what you're good at. So spend the next 10 years I would say, going deep in that sweet spot of yours. And the next decade will be basically you getting the money out of that experience. And maybe of course, 10, 10, 10, you might adjust based on, I would say, your will, but I think it's very true. Don't underestimate the value of getting a lot of experience in your first 10 years and basically say yes to everything that is coming in front of you. You won't regret it. At least I did not regret any single weird experiences that I had in my first 10 years.
That makes me feel an awful lot better about the very random nature of my first 10 years in tech, has to be said. Look, it's been an absolute genuine pleasure talking to you. Thank you for the very thoughtful conversation and for sharing both the polish and the scars.
Thanks a lot, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the whole episode. I appreciate your time. So just before you go, I'd like to ask you for a favor in return for putting together this episode of the CTO Playbook for you. Please share the episode with just one person who will appreciate it. Wherever you're listening, whether that is Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or another platform, sharing the episode will help more CTOs find the podcast and enable me to create more great content. Remember that you can find more information on the CTOplaybook.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of the CTO Playbook.